Today I thought I'd talk about how to create a landscape in 3 simple steps. Now I'm not going to do any drawing for this painting at all. I'm going to use a pencil and mark out just outside there on the edge on the masking tape pretty much where I want the horizon to be. And that's it for the drawing basically. So the first step really is to paint the sky and then all the lightest elements in one go. So I'll lay some water down over the paper, not too much. Don't want to absolutely saturate it, and I can leave a few little areas dry as well, so I get some texture going on in that sky. But I'm going to lay the sky in pretty much wet in wet, so I'm getting some soft diffused edges. And more often than not, the lightest elements are in your sky anyway. So I'll start off with some raw sienna, and that's going to give a really nice glow. So it's pretty much neat raw sienna. I'm mixing it in with some of the greys that are in the palette there, as I always do. That helps to tone it down a tiny little bit. But laying some of that paint down, quite dilute, and laying that down into the water that I've laid on the paper there. Touch a little bit of light red into that as well, change the colour a little bit. And now I can start bringing that down to where I put the little marks on the side of the tape there. So that's pretty much where the horizon's going to be. Now lay a little bit more raw sienna in there. And now I can start getting some darker elements in this sky. So I've got some ultramarine and I've put some light red into that. So it's made it more of a dark blue, kind of like an indigo type colour. And it's all still wet up there in that sky where I've laid the raw sienna in, so I can start laying into that as well, and it will soften around the edges. It's a few little areas that I didn't wet at the initial stage, so there's going to be some tiny little areas of the paint breaking up there. And I've touched a little bit of cobalt blue into that mixture as well, just for a little bit more variation. And so I'm laying this blue in fairly dark, and it's really accentuating that light of the raw sienna. Change that colour again with a little bit more ultramarine. And there's those little sparkly white areas that are formed there. I'm going to leave some of that behind. That should add a little bit of interest and a little bit of light in there. I've now added some burnt sienna into that blue. And so I've gone a little bit darker now. I can touch that in here and there all the time, working very quickly. And so the aim of this is to have light against dark all the time. So I've got the light of the raw sienna, I'm laying the darker blue next to that, and that really makes that light stand out. And now as I'm getting closer down to the horizon, I can make this slightly grayer and make the brush strokes a tiny little bit smaller as well. That should help with the perspective. Cover up some of those little sparkly areas. I don't want too many, especially near the edge of the painting. And a couple of little more shapes down towards that horizon there. And that's the sky finished. So now I can move on and paint the lightest elements in the land. So I've got more raw sienna. I've touched a little bit of burnt sienna into it. I can continue this wash down and join it into that sky wash at the horizon there, and it will run down a tiny little bit. But that's fine. So I picked up some of that blue that's still in the palette there from the sky colours. I've mixed a little bit of raw sienna into that, and I'm dragging this paint across, leaving some little sparkly areas behind. That gives me the option to have little light areas in the land if I want them. I could cover them up as well, but we'll see how it goes. And so now I've made that paint slightly a little bit darker, tiniest little bit darker as I come down, right down towards the foreground. A little bit of burnt sienna in there as well. And bring that all the way down. So now in that very quick wash, I've painted a sky and I've got all that land in, all the lightest elements in the land. So I'll dry that wash off now. Moving on to stage 2. So I've got the sky, that's fully done, that's completely dry, and I've got all the light elements in the land. So I can work on some of the mid-tones and some texture in the land, and I'll get some distance as well. So I'm using pretty much the same colours in the sky, and I'll drag a little bit of water across with the mist bottle. I'll just knock out any little drips that are formed there. I don't want the paint to run into those, but I just knock them out with the back of my finger. But I want a tiny little bit of moisture there because I want this to soften and really disappear into the distance and kind of blend in with the raw sienna that's already on the paper. So using some of these little bits of blue and grey that are in the palette there, bringing in a little bit of distance. And it's a Norfolk countryside scene, so there's a church on the horizon. Now very simply suggest that it's nothing more really than a little rectangle shape with a couple of little points on the top. And join that in one big wash all the way across. Give it another little mist with the bottle. Tiniest little spray with the mist bottle there just to soften everything off. And then continue that shape all the way across there. I can allow it to break up in places. Give it another tiny little spray there with the bottle. Now I can start continuing this down now as another wash over the top of the first wash. So I'll swap back to a slightly larger brush. And again picked up everything in the palette from the sky wash and touched a little bit of burnt sienna into that. Now I can start joining that in with that distance. And now I'm looking to get some texture in this land. A little bit more raw sienna in there. And I can drag that across, making sure I don't cover up completely that first wash. If those little elements are light, are going to add the tiny little bits of sparkle, little bits of interest. So working very quickly, getting little bits of dry brush happening. Now as I come down into the foreground, I can swap back to a larger brush still, the brush I used for the sky, which is a size 16 sable. The medium sized brush I'm using now I think is a size 8 and the small one is a size 4. But I'm getting down into the foreground now so I can get a little bit darker, and that all helps with the aerial perspective. So having my darker, warmer shapes in the foreground and then cooler, lighter or lower value, less value off into the distance. And now before all this dries I can touch a little bit of darker paint where that distance meets the field. Creates a little bit of separation there. I'm essentially doing all of the drawing and everything with the brush by building up layers and working in washes, little bits of wet in wet, little bits of dry brush, allowing it to run together to create interesting shapes. So I'm not really drawing anything as such, I'm painting shapes. Now moving on, everything's dry again and I can add the darkest shapes now and the darkest tones in there. That's really going to pull everything together. It's going to bring the foreground closer and it's going to push that distance back. So I can mix this paint up quite dark now. I've got ultramarine and burnt sienna, and I can almost get a black with this. So I'm using the size 4 sable, and I'm going to add a little bit of interest right in the foreground. So I'll have like a little broken fence, and it connects the sky down into the land. And so very quickly dragging, getting that little broken line there with a little bit of dry brush. And so bringing in some vertical elements. Vary that colour a little bit, put a little bit of raw sienna in there. Now it's quite nice painting broken up old fences. They always seem to add a nice charming little element into a painting. And you can be very loose with this. Getting little bits of dry brush doesn't matter about getting straight lines. Kind of the more wonky you make it look, the better really. So looking for an overall pleasing shape for this really. Connect that down into the land. And so I move on to a larger brush again, and I can now join that into the land. And again, because I haven't got any drawing, I can be very loose with this. I can be very free, making shapes with the brush, allowing the brush to do all of the work essentially. Get some more burnt sienna, a bit of cobalt blue this time. Using the whole brush as well, so using it on its side, using the tip of the brush. Very lightly drag some texture into that middle ground area. Now working like this, making shapes with the brush, it's a very nice way to get lots of texture in a painting without having to do much work at all really. So again, using the brush on its side, not covering up the first wash entirely as well, leaving little areas shining through for little bits of light. And by getting this real strong dark in now, and that tiny touch of interest with that broken fence and these real strong darks down in the foreground has really acts to push that distance right back. And also having these strong darks in there really makes that light stand out. It gives a real sense of a rainy cloud off in the distance and then light shining through. Touch a little bit of cobalt blue into all of that as well while it's still wet. I'll drop a little bit of light red in there as well. And now already just these 3 simple steps that I've followed, and I'm pretty much finished. I've pretty much got a completed painting. But I'll grab a piece of plastic card, break up these dark shapes, scratch out a couple of little highlights. Now I don't want to overdo it. It's really a couple of tiny little bits of mark making in there. A little bit of afterthought. I've dried it off and I think I need something on the right hand side. So I'm going to go back in, mix up some more dark paint, and I'll add a couple of posts just out there on the right hand side just to close this little area off there. So same as I did on the left there, a couple of little bits of dry brush and some very simple little posts. Just closes that area off, pushes the eye into the middle there, or into the focal point. Okay, that's the painting finished. Very simple demo in many ways, but it's using 3 simple steps to create a landscape painting. So if you think of your first stage is going to be painting the lighter elements, so get the sky in one go and then paint all of the lightest elements down into the land and create that in one wash, and then you get a very nice cohesive feel to everything. And then you can lay in your mid-tones and your distance in the second stage, get all of that in place, then dry that again, and then once all that's in there, bring it all together with some simple darks, some strong dark shapes, add some interest and some real good strong contrast to really accentuate that light, and it makes for quite a nice interesting little painting. Now you can use this technique for pretty much anything you paint. If you think of those 3 steps, you can't really go far wrong. But anyway, I hope you like this little demo. If you did, let me know what you think and give me a comment and like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. That really helps me out. But anyway, thanks for watching everybody, and I'll see you in the next video.